But there we go. It's live.
Okay, we are here for our HOA meeting, and I'm Lehua Corpaz.
I'm Taylor Araujo.
And I'm Courtney Cagle.
And we are going to get started. Let's see. We're talking about religious freedom, a basic human right. And let's see, one of the questions that we have from our readings was, how do we achieve fairness for all? I know. I like that. Let me see if I can pull up the book with my one hand. I like that. Let me go back and try. The First Amendment Defense Act. I think that would achieve fairness for all. That's my answer. Because it protects the rights of all Americans, whatever religious practice that they may believe in, whatever religious faith they have. So I think that that would be fair for all parties, for people that don't want to be forced into others' religious beliefs. This will protect them. The First Amendment Defense Act. And that was introduced, let's see, by in the Senate by the Mike Lee of Utah. And it was introduced, I believe, just shortly after, in June of 2015, just shortly after the Supreme Court's ruling in Obergefell. So I think that would work for one thing. How about you guys?
Yeah, I agree that the First Amendment Act would work really, really well. And I took this question kind of like, how do I achieve fairness, or like how can we be? So when I answered it, I just said, like, the best way that we can achieve fairness is for every single person to stand up for what they believe in and not allow others to walk all over them and their beliefs. Because I feel like sometimes people just will do what is popular rather than what they actually believe. And if people were more true to what they believe, like religious freedom, because I feel like most people do agree that people should have freedom of religion. I think that most people believe that that's a basic human right. But when it comes to, what we're discussing, like same-sex marriage and stuff, sometimes people will falter because of what's popular in the culture and stuff. Not because of what they might actually believe, but just because they don't want to take anybody off, or they don't want to lose money, or whatever it may be. So I think that the way that we achieve fairness is just by, maintaining a structural integrity and each sharing our own views and standing up for what we believe in.
I also kind of took it how Courtney took it, and it was more of a what can I do sort of a thing. And this week's lesson, so this last semester I was an on-campus student and I took the religious freedom class with Brother Hammond, and I cannot praise that class enough because it was probably one of the best classes I've ever taken. And it kind of got me reflecting on some of the things that we talked about in that class. And one thing that Brother Hammond made a really strong point of mentioning is that we can only, it's not about defending my religious freedom. I can sit here and preach for the religious freedom of Mormons all I want, but I need to do it as a whole. I need to be able to protect religious freedom for everyone, not just for the Mormons, not just for the Catholics, but even for the religions that I don't believe in. And the only way that I can go about doing that is learning what it is that they believe. Because I can't say, well, Catholics should have the right to do, well, what? Because I don't even know what it is that they do. And I can't defend religion as a whole if I don't understand religion as a whole. The most important thing I think that we can do to advocate for religious freedom is to understand what freedoms each religion needs and why they want it, because we can't advocate for it if we don't understand it.
Those are great points, girls. Those are really great points, you guys. I like those. Okay, our next question is, how do we address third-party lawsuits? Any ideas?
So this question was kind of hard because I read over the questions before and I actually had to go back and like read the chapter again because I was like, what? Like it doesn't even talk about this. And so I like went back and I was like reading through it and I still was like, I have no idea because I don't really get the legal system. So I just like came up with my best answer. And I just said if someone is sued by a third party for being intolerant, that we can just provide support and help fight with them. And we can help by standing up for them. And we can let the media and others know that, you know, this isn't intolerance, but that they're just defending their rights as citizens. Because I didn't really know how to answer the question, so I kind of just took it and applied it to myself again. I'm not sure that's what it's asking for, but that's how I took it.
I like that answer. It kind of made me think of the florist and the Bible that she got and the letters that she got that kind of helped. I mean, of course, she got hate mail, but she also got a lot of letters of support. But I think that one thing, I mean, it's kind of a hard question because you kind of sit here and think, well, what power do I have just as a random person? But I think that that's kind of where it comes down to us advocating for laws and getting laws changed, because I don't think that there should be any reason. I mean, I get third party. I get that to an extent, because there are situations in some cases where it does come down to one person and what they've done, but it's not. It shouldn't reflect on a religious point of view, and I think that that's where it's up to us to help advocate and change the laws so that there is no possibility to sue for religious discrimination or things like that. Because if we change the law, then there's nothing to support, because there's no misunderstandings of religion or personal beliefs or things like that that can be sued in the first place.
I think those are both really good points. And I think that, like you said, I also think that by supporting the people, you know, like that woman, the florist, she obviously had a lot of support from various organizations that were trying to help her through it all. And her positiveness was quite impressive to me, that she could still be so positive through it all, even though everything was like falling down around her. Kind of reminded me of Job, but but yes, and I also believe that by having this First Amendment Defense Act in place would protect those that are sued for their religious beliefs, which is such an atrocity that would even happen, but it does. We read all about it. So, and then our next question is, what is the legal precedent for these lawsuits? So, I have a feeling that it's not good, the way it stands right now. I'm not really sure, so I'm guessing that because they're all losing, that the legal precedent currently is that businesses are required or are being forced to do business for all people, regardless of their religious affiliations or their religious beliefs. So that's why there's a call for us to protect our religious freedom throughout this country, like it was set up at the beginning in our Constitution. So, other responses? You know what? Before, something else that I thought was kind of interesting. I know, like, because I used to work in the high school, and I know that, like, if certain things, like there was always something written in there in the paperwork that if certain activities or events or functions were in conflict with the students' religious beliefs, then they were exempt from joining in or participating, or exempt from being marked absent or whatever. So I thought, why doesn't that apply to businesses, since it's being applied to students who are in school, which is a public school? I don't know. It was just a thought that came through my mind as I was reading our chapter that we just read. Other thoughts, girls?
That question kind of just like wonked me from the start, because I was never really sure. Kind of like you, I wasn't really sure where the question was going. So that was actually when I didn't answer yet, because I was kind of waiting to see what everyone else said. However, I like what you mentioned about the schools being exempt, because that's something we spoke about in my religious freedom class too.
Oh.
About how we talked about prayer in school, and how public school versus private school, how sometimes it's legal, sometimes it's not, and it really just comes down to where you're at. And I think that one thing that needs to be done is there needs to be a standard on how that goes. Because I went to a public school, but I went to public school that was, my graduating class was 50. I was in Central Illinois, and we prayed. We had moments of silence, and it was, I just expected that. But then I had another girl that was from, where was she from? Iowa. Just a state right over. And she said, we got kicked out if we did prayer at school. Like, we just couldn't do it. And I thought it was weird that, like, we would have public prayer in our public school, and the state right next door didn't. And I think that when we create a standard throughout the United States with this is how it's going to be and this is how it's not, and it doesn't vary from state to state. So, some states say, okay, well, we're going to support the gay marriage, and everyone has to support it too. Well, then the state next door says that's not the case for us. Well, we need to have an equal standard, so that there is no confusion. There is no chance to slide around or say, well, they're doing it, why aren't we? If everyone gets the same standard, then it's not a question of, public school versus private school, or this state versus that state. It's the United States of America as a whole stands for this. That's one thing that needs to be done. Otherwise, it just causes all the confusion, and it gives us a reason to backlash each other.
Good points. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like that. You actually made me think of my school. We also had like a silent moment, and we also did the Pledge of Allegiance, which says one nation under God in it. And every single person had to do it, and even though it says that, like, everybody would pledge allegiance to the flag. And people, you didn't have to do it. Like, a kid could not do it and he wouldn't get in trouble. Like, if he didn't believe in God, maybe he wouldn't say that word, he would like omit it or whatever. But, everybody would do that, and we were allowed to, pray in school if we wanted to. And I think that's good. I think that's important. And I think the reason why some states don't do that is because of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that we were reading about. Because every state has their own version of it, so they can kind of amend it to fit their state and how they want it to be. That's what I said was the legal precedent. I said the Religious Freedom Restoration Act is the precedent, because that was kind of like the act that set like the principle for the other cases and acts that would follow. And that's like what people would go off of to defend their side of the argument. You know, they would say, well, in the act it says this. And so I think that's probably why a lot of states have, you know, different laws regarding religious freedom. But I agree with you, Taylor. I think that it should be one standard for the whole nation. I think religious freedom should be throughout the whole United States, not just some states having it in some schools, especially if it's public. I mean, if it's a public school, then religious freedom is definitely necessary. In a private school, I can see why it kind of changes things, especially if it's like a religious school, like a Catholic private school or something. I could see why, you know, they wouldn't allow religious freedom. But yeah, I definitely agree that it should be one standard for all of the US.
Yes, I think so too. We, in the high school that I worked in, we had the pledge, we'd said the pledge of, stood and said the Pledge of Allegiance every day, and also had a moment of silence where we could pray every day. And I really liked that. It really set my day great. So, and that was when I lived in Virginia. We had that. So that was good. Okay, the next question. What threat should the LDS Church be concerned about? For example, adoption, religious schools, etc. Well, I think anything that would be a threat to the family, because the family is central to the Creator's plan. So anything that would be a threat to the family, which we have a whole list of them, you know, that we all signed up for in our class. So that would be my answer. We should be concerned about anything that is a threat to the family.
I like that answer. I was kind of on edge on this because, you know, yes, we need to be concerned about what's threats to the family, because that's what our religion is all about. But at the same time, I think that we need to, our biggest concern or our biggest threat is, see, and now I don't know, because I had one thing I wanted to say and now I'm not sure. I think that one thing that we need to really focus on is these religious freedoms as a whole. I think that the biggest fear is not what they will cause, but what will be taken away if they don't exist. And I think that people get so afraid that, you know, oh, well, religious freedom means that people can, you know, wear flags on their shirts and march around all day and do whatever it is they want. And that's not a concern to me. If that's what you want to do, go for it. My main concern is what happens when we don't have it. So I think as an LDS community, our concern shouldn't be what starts to happen when we have it. If we have it, then we can work with that. What we can't work with is not having it. So the concern to me isn't what's going to happen when everyone starts to have their religious freedom. We don't. So I don't know. Like I'm kind of like all over with that answer because I'm not really sure where I think we should stand on it.
I think those are both really great points. I definitely think that the LDS Church should be concerned with threats about the family, and I think that they are, you know, like as a whole. And I also think that the LDS Church, I mean, I feel like we're concerned about every threat to an individual or the family, anything that could harm somebody and could prevent them, you know, from, I don't know, eternal happiness, you know, if anything that could prevent somebody from reaching heaven, you know, that's a threat that the LDS Church is concerned about. And it might not be on a huge level where they're actually taking action and doing something about it, you know, but like as a community, we discuss it and we try to figure things out within the church. And then through that, we try to help others and we try to lend a hand to others and we try to show them that we care about everybody and we want everybody to be protected and we want all threats to the family, to individuals to go away. And especially like with religious freedom, I agree with you, Taylor. You know, like if it's something if we have our religious freedom, then we don't need to, be worried about those who are fighting for, their religious freedom. Like, that's great. Like, that's important, So I think it's really just about um, balancing and protecting all of our rights and our beliefs, and also helping others and just maintaining the threats. I don't know. I don't know if that answer made sense because it was all over the place, but that's what I'll say.
No, that was really good. And similar to what Taylor, you first mentioned, it made me think of, in our reading, how he stated the power to tax is the power to destroy, and how they wanted to take away tax exemptions for religions in our chapter. And so the power to tax is the power to destroy. So by doing that, they would be destroying religion, religious freedom. So I think that's a very powering point that you made, in that we need to all be able to uphold our religious freedom, because everything else will fall into place. So that was good. Okay. And then our final question is, how can the justice system be so biased? That's been my question that I ponder on every week, practically. I don't know enough about it to know why the other two legislative branches, the executive branch and the legislative branch of government, allowed the Supreme Court branch to rule like they did in their ruling, unless they were in support of it, or they just didn't want to be bothered, or it was just insignificant to them, because all three branches of government are in place to do checks and balances on each other. And to be quite honest, I don't believe that occurred, but I have not looked into it. But it just seems hard with all of the members of Congress and the senators that they would all go along with that, knowing that there are others that disagree with what happened. So I don't know how they can be so biased. Maybe they were bought. I don't know. I know that sounds harsh and maybe judgmental, but I do know it happens. I don't know. Any thoughts?
I agree with you, Lahua. It's kind of unfathomable to kind of just to look at the system and wonder, how did it get this way? And I think that one thing that I've not in defense of them in any way, but I think that also they are so biased because it's made up of human beings who are biased. Like, obviously I'm going to stand in support of what I believe, and I think that these people see that they have power and that they have a say, and so they use that to their advantage, and that's how it gets so mixed up, is that no one really checks. Like you said, they're supposed to do checks and balances. They don't, because what if it goes against what it is that they're fighting for? I think that people are so concerned about themselves that they don't look at the nation as a whole, and that's how it becomes biased, because the people that are running the governmental systems have their own belief systems, and they don't think about the United States as a whole. They think of themselves and their own personal beliefs, and that's kind of where it starts to get that individualistic bias going on, because it's starting to become run by individuals, not as different branches of government that should be standing and checking and balancing and making sure that things are going a certain way. Instead, and I could be totally wrong. I don't know much about government the way that I should, and maybe they're doing everything that they can to make it not biased. But from my personal point of view, It just looks like a bunch of people who are fighting for themselves and not fighting for a nation.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you're saying that. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's biased because they are individuals. They're human beings too. They make mistakes, but they probably don't even see it as a mistake. It's just because when they have power, they have money, they can pretty much do whatever they want, especially if the system isn't working properly how it should be. If there's no checks and balances happening, then they could pretty much believe what they want and vote how they want, and they don't think about citizens of the United States. They aren't thinking about everybody and their views on it. They're thinking about their beliefs, like you were saying, and they're being more individualistic than they are being, a society. I don't know the word for it, but the opposite of individualistic. I can't think of the word. But yeah, they're not being um, people. They're not being one with the people. They're choosing their side and they're sticking with it. And that's why it's so biased, because people aren't focusing on what others want. They're only focusing on what they want. And I also said, when I was writing stuff down, I also was talking about how the system is biased because it doesn't allow freedom for everyone. It doesn't. There are like certain people who are allowed freedom, and the justice system should be that all citizens of the United States are represented through these individuals that we picked out. But that's not how it is. That's never how it is. And it's hard to make it like that because we are imperfect human beings, and so it's never going to be a perfect system. But lately the Supreme Court has had more power, and I'm not sure why this happened. Like you, Lahua, I'm not really sure how this happened. But I think since people agree with the Supreme Court, they're like, oh, whatever. Like, even if everybody else disagrees in the United States, I agree. So I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm not going to do anything about it. So I think that's really what it is. It's like people, the individuals in the government are corrupt, and they only focus on what they want rather than what the whole nation wants. So I agree with you guys.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I remember we listened to that woman speak. Roos was her last name. She was Catholic, and she spoke on that clear podium video that we watched. I thought she gave a really powerful speech. And in it, she mentioned how each of the states had passed their own laws concerning marriage between a man and a woman, and that they had done so by the voters. And yet the Supreme Court, who are not in there they're not in there because they were voted in there. They're in there because they were appointed. How they just threw away each of the state's laws and disregarded them that the voters had chosen, and then they made their own ruling. So wouldn't that, I thought that was horrible. And then a thought came to mind this week that wouldn't it be great if Elder Oaks was on the Supreme Court, because, we learned how fair he was. And we just know how fair he is in general, but especially like what he did in Chicago when they had the standout. So anyway, that's the end of our questions. Do you guys have any other thoughts on the readings that we read this week that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that was kind of the main point of everything. I liked our discussion.
Okay, so you want to go ahead and do the summary then?
Sure.
Thank you.
So in summary of this lesson, we have decided that that the branches of government are run by human beings, who are run by individuals who are flawed, and thus we have a flawed justice system to some extent. We talked about how there should be a standard of laws when it comes to the United States as a whole, and not as states as individuals, so that we can come to a more, I guess, foolproof understanding of how our religious freedom works. We talked about the importance of religious freedom and understanding religions and understanding what the cost of not having religious freedom would be, and why it's so important to us as members of the LDS faith to stand and support religious freedom for not just ourselves but for everyone. We discussed kind of just the basic understandings that we have of situations that have happened in the past where florists have been sued, where individuals have been sued for not being able to provide services for things that are against their belief. And we talked about how we think that laws need to change to support people in their religious beliefs and not condemn them basically for the things that they choose. And overall, I think we had a really great discussion.
Me too. Thank you so much, Taylor.
Okay, I'm going to stop it now. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.